Hello, I'm Marian Arrowsmith, and welcome to our show. Today, our guest is Mr. Joseph C. Buccaran, who is from Slidell High, taught there, was principal there, certainly brought a lot of new things into our parish through Slidell High. So welcome, Joe.
Well, thank you. Glad to be here.
So, tell us how did you get into education, and what did you do before you were principal?
Well, in 7th grade, I knew I wanted to be a teacher. I had a wonderful science teacher at Buccaran High School, and she sparked that interest, and all throughout high school I never deviated. Went to college for the sole purpose of getting a degree in science education and to teach, and that's how it all got started. Chose Southeastern, graduated in 1963, right on the heels of Sputnik. So everyone wanted science teachers, so it wasn't very difficult to find a job. Had offers from all over Louisiana, Florida, and got a call one day from St. Tammany and said that they had a job opening for a biology teacher in St. Tammany if you will come for an interview. So I went on a Saturday before graduation and interviewed with Dr. Clee Parker, sitting on his porch swing, is where my interview was, and he said, well, the job is in Slidell. I said, oh, I don't know about Slidell. All I could remember about Slidell was a railroad track and the white kitchen. So he said, well, go down and meet the principal. So I went down and I met Mr. McGinty, and he hired me on the spot, and it's been there ever since for 40 years.
So you taught...
Taught biology for 13 years, then became principal, which was unusual because I went from the classroom to the principalship, and took over from a wonderful man who was there for 41 years. Skipped the whole assistant principal thing, so it was a cultural shock.
Were there many assistant principals then?
They had three. They had three at the time.
Okay.
And there had a number of applicants, but I got the job.
Well, what was Slidell like when you first started teaching there?
Oh, when I first started teaching there, other than St. Tammany High, it was the only high school that served the whole eastern side of the parish. There was no Pearl River High, Salmon, North Shore. We got all of the kids from Pearl River, all of the kids from Lacombe, so it was the high school, and that's how I kind of got that concept, the high school. When I got there at 63, it was just booming. You know, the whole area was just growing so rapidly. In fact, my first teaching assignment was in a portable, and there were portables. There have been portables at Slidell High ever since. So wow. It continued to grow and expand so rapidly. It was very small, very tiny, but it grew rapidly.
Where was Slidell High when you started?
It was on the current location that it is now. The interesting story about that was when they went to build the new school in the late 50s, early 60s, townspeople were very upset because they were placing it on the out of town, so to speak. It was not centrally located to the town, and a lot of people were upset with it.
Kind of funny now when you look at it, because it's right in the middle of everything.
Right. It was a cow pasture, I think.
Wow. So there were woods and stuff all around.
All around. In fact, as a science teacher, I got to use those woods as a sort of outdoor laboratory. It was wonderful.
So when you took over as principal, I think I remember you having some excitement your first year.
I was named August 5th, 1976, and exactly 2 months later, on October 5th, half the building burned.
Wow.
Got the call in the middle of the night saying that the gym was on fire. You better get up there with some keys. And of course, as a new principal, I had a handful of keys that I didn't know where they went. Okay. So, but by the time I got there, someone had bashed in the front window, and you could feel the heat of the gym because the office was located pretty close, and started handing out file drawers of records to people that took them and put them in their cars, and the passerbys that just came and got the things. But it was pretty devastating fire. Without the gym and the cafeteria for a year and a half.
So how did you survive that? What were some of the challenges you
had?
had?
The challenges were, how do you teach PE, which we had 2 bus sheds we converted to PE dressing rooms. We had no gym for basketball, and we were about to start the basketball season, so we played our basketball games and practiced at Boyette. And it's interesting, Trey Foltz was a senior. That was his senior year during that fire. And then we had lunches that were made at Bonnie Cole and brought over hamburgers and French fries and made it like 8 o'clock in the morning, and we served them at noon out of a portable window. And the kids lounged on they were very well adjusted. They lounged in the grassy areas and ate their lunch, and it was an ordeal. We had, on rainy days for PE, we sat down the halls and played bingo and other board games. You had to walk over kids during PE class because they were all in the hall.
But I bet your faculty really pulled together as a team.
It was amazing because to show you what a new principal would do as opposed to someone more experienced, the fire was on Monday night. I was bound and determined to get the school back open, so we opened on Friday. There were timbers from the gym that was still smoldering, and that day of the fire, the Tuesday morning when people started drifting in, heard of it on the news and so forth, the teachers, we went down and had a faculty meeting to make some plans, and we came out and the kids had decorated the school.
Wow.
They had donuts for the teachers, and they had signs hanging there, you know, the Phoenix will rise, and I'd still get chills thinking about that.
Yeah, it's amazing out of disasters
Oh,
what
yeah.
good stuff can
And
come.
I remember, God bless his soul, Mr. Sip Shane was my superintendent, and I remember as they finally got the fire under control about 4 in the morning, we went to Bill Foltz's house to make plans to notify bus drivers and to get things going.
Because he was a board member at that time.
Right, he was a board member at that time. And I remember we got Mr. Shane's car, and he says, "Joe, you still want to be principal?" I said, "Yeah." So, but we endured it, and we were stronger for it. You know, out of tragedy, you always find good things come out of it.
That's so true. Unfortunately, the rest of your career went a whole lot.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Lots
We had a
of
flood. You know, we had the May '95 flood, which wasn't that bad, and we had normal day-to-day problems. But overall, it was a good ride.
Right. Well, you got a lot of new programs and things started while you were there. Tell us about some of those things.
Well, we did a lot of work with strategic planning. We really tried to upgrade curriculum. We instituted the career academies, which became a model not only for St. Tammany but for the state as a whole. We instituted our Tiger Families, which came out of strategic planning to make a school more family-oriented and worthwhile. We started different programs like the MARC events. We had designed logos for each class, and the whole job was to make sure you left the highest mark on the school.
Tell us about the MARC events.
Well, it's really kind of fascinating because we recognized that the kids had a lot of class competition because they would always yell their numbers at assemblies, but they didn't have a whole lot of school spirit. So we wanted to channel some of that class spirit into school spirit, and we formed the MARC events. And they was just kind of amazing to me. Each class was in competition with the class to see who would leave the highest mark, and the contest varied from year to year, but it was kind of interesting. One of them that I really remember is we wanted to see how big a million was. So we were going to collect 1,000,000 pennies. And we put them in these huge water jars, like from Kentwood and so forth. And we had them in the hall. So we got to thinking, you know, we have $10,000 in the hall. That was there for several weeks. And we said, well, no one could move them because they were so heavy. But the kids learned how big 1,000,000 was. Another thing we did was...
What'd you do with the money afterwards?
We used it to help air condition the gym. That was the goal, was to help air condition the gym. Another one that we really remember was a food drive. The kids, each class was in competition to bring as many food items for community Christian concern. And it was really funny because they found if they collected money, they could buy cheap items. And one of the cheapest things back then, this was the early 90s, was baby food. So they just cleaned out, the night before it was over, they cleaned out the city of Slidell of baby food. The grocery stores had to send emergency trucks to New Orleans so that Slidell would have baby food. But the class of 90 won that, and they arrived the next morning with 18-wheeler full of food items. It was like, 80,000 food items that they had bought. So,
Wow.
but it sparked a lot of interest in the school, and as a consequence, it brought the kids together, and anyone could participate. You know, it wasn't just an athlete or a dance team member or a cheerleader. It was open to everyone.
And then did they leave something there to show what they had done?
Their mark was, it's like a logo that represents each class, and they were posted on the wall, and they could move their marks to the highest level. Is how it worked.
Oh, okay.
So,
You talked about tiger families. What was that?
Tiger families came out of, that was a strategic planning thing, is how could we bring our kids closer together? So we decided that we would have, everyone in the school would have a homeroom or a tiger family, from the principal, all of the professional the teachers, guidance counselors, assistant principals. So you have a smaller group, and you would follow that group for 4 years. So if you started off with freshmen, you would have the same students each year, and you would be the first counselor to them. You know, you would know them. You could check their report cards. You could we even had social gatherings for them. It was a really good program. They've continued it.
So did they meet once a day, like a homeroom?
No, they met when the need was need, like to hand out report cards or to pass out information. It didn't meet every day. I met my tiger family in my office, and some of the finest memories of students I have is through that tiger family.
Because you would have really gotten to know them
right.
and their
Right.
families. Huh. And that's still continuing, you
Yes.
said?
And it was a small group. You had maybe 13, 14 students in it because everyone had one. And you couldn't send a child to the office because everyone was busy. So the school sort of shut down for Tiger Family. So that was a good program.
That's great. What were some of the other things that you guys
Well, we
started
were
out?
the first school to have ROTC. We instituted the ROTC. As I said, the career families we instituted. Just a number of different activities that a lot of it came out of planning, you know, just getting together and saying, what do we need to do to improve? I remember the career academies. It was we brought business people together from the community, and we asked them, what are we doing that we can help? They said, well, you're doing a great job at educating them. You know, they have the academics, but they don't have a sense of the workplace. You're not doing very well there. They don't know how to interview for a job. They'll bring another kid with them, and they'll be not properly dressed, and they won't have the right kind of paperwork. So with that, we got the bug to start an orientation class, a career orientation class, and then the career academies. We had this huge hospital sitting across the street. We had all of these kids that were interested in the medical field. We knew that 20 years down the road, the medical profession was going to be full of job offers.
As it still is today.
As it still is today. And so that was the beginning. And then we expanded it to the business community, to banking, ecology was one, engineering. And these kids could do a non-paid internship out in the community and learn actually if they were cut out for that sort of work.
So that's, some people may know that as school to work.
School to
or
work.
Yeah. School.
Right.
So you did the health, you did communication, I think.
Communications was one. Well, another program we started, we were the first school to wire our school for cable TV. And you know, who helped me with that was my assistant principal, Trey Foltz. We wired that school, and we got it running, and we actually ran cable TV shows within the school. Now it's so sophisticated, but back then it was quite a deal. We had a little studio, and we broadcast, and the school shut down to look at cable TV.
Isn't that amazing?
We called it Cable Tiger something, I don't know.
So Trey was a
He
teacher?
was assistant principal. Actually, I go way back with Mr. Foltz because he was a student of mine in biology. And then he came back as assistant principal. So we go back.
So he
long.
wasn't a teacher there?
No, he taught at Salmon.
Oh, okay.
And he taught computer science at Salmon and was assistant basketball coach there. And he came to us in 1990. And
now he's moved up to lead the system.
That's
so
right.
started with you in
That's right.
science.
In biology.
That's great. You also did a lot with fine arts at your school.
Well, I always say we have to approach every kid. You know, we can't just have an athletic school. We were successful with athletics, but there were a lot of kids in music and in theater that wanted to expand their interests. So we did a lot of plays. We started the senior musicals started way back in the early 60s. And each year we gave the seniors an opportunity to participate, whether it was behind stage or in front of the audience, and to give as many an opportunity as we could to participate. So that continued to grow. And then we had a thespian troupe that grew, and ultimately we got the auditorium in '97, and now it's really expanded. They have several big productions a year, and
before you had the auditorium, where did you?
We put the big plays on. The senior musicals were put on at the Slidell Municipal Auditorium, which meant we practiced at the school up until the week before, and then you had to move all your scenery and everything to the school, to the municipal auditorium, and have the production there.
Wow.
So.
And the kids did everything.
Yes. We built the scenery. The students were involved in the orchestra. So they had a good time with that. And it gave kids an opportunity, you know, that they wouldn't have had otherwise. And with that, the music program expanded, the vocal music and the instrumental music.
Which is still going strong
sure
as well. For some reason, I remember you doing a lot with creative writing when that was growing.
Well, creative writing, we had a course, we taught a course in it. At one time, we had to have, the state increased the number of credits a student needed to graduate, and we didn't have enough, we had a 7-period schedule, we didn't have enough subjects to fill those schedules, so the seniors were opting out early, and I didn't want to see that. So we instituted a lot of different courses, and creative writing was one of them.
Slidell High, because of its age and all of the things that have been going there, has a lot of traditions. What are some of the ones that come to mind?
Well, I think that I like to size it up like the kids have a feel for the school, and it's passed down from generation to generation almost. First off, you have a lot of students that have parents and grandparents that went there, and that's true of any school that's as old as Slidell High. But there's something about bleeding green and white, and I think it starts with people who care. I think I was blessed with teachers who sometimes says, oh, this is going to be more work, but they were ready to pitch in, and they got involved. So I think that that's part of it.
But I think they also followed your lead because you were there and involved with it. I mean, you've talked about the fact that you had your Tiger families as well.
Well, I never expected a teacher to do anything more than I did. So I had to set the example. And word spread, I think, among the students that these are the expectations. One of the things that, these are two things that are in conflict with me. I have a creative side, but I also have an organized side. And sometimes they clash bitterly. So I tried to use some of my creative talents, limited as they were, to promote the school. At the same time, I wanted everything to be organized and everybody to know their place and what they had to do. And that started with the students. For example, I would go into an assembly, and when I walked up to the microphone, the students had to get quiet. I didn't have to tell them. Now, it started out where you'd have the typical high school thing where they all went shh, 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 you know, I waited them out 10 minutes. And finally, they were so uncomfortable that it never happened again. And they passed that down for each new class that came in. And I would be a good disciplinarian in that respect. And I don't mean to brag, but I think that I set the tone for expectations of behavior. And they delivered. I was always amazed at graduation, because graduation with a high school group who was getting out, you said anything can go wrong. But they always cooperated and said, this means a lot to Mr. Buccaran, it means a lot to the school, it means a lot to the community, because I tell them, other than the Mardi Gras parade, this is going to be the biggest group assembled in Slidell, is to watch you graduate. So it's just was a tradition that's been handed down. Mutual respect, I think it was.
A huge amount of pride.
Yeah,
in the school.
I respected them, and they respected me and the teachers, the school.
I
as a
never
whole.
got to attend one of your student orientation, but I heard that you had was it student orientation
Well,
or
we
the
did a
teacher?
freshman orientation.
Freshman orientation.
And we also did, we always picked a theme for the year. And the theme varied from year to year, and it was secret until Teachers' Day. And we had a big breakfast and the presentation of the theme. And the teachers always got a T-shirt, staff always got a T-shirt, and I found funds for those kinds of things.
What were some of the ones that you remember?
Well, I remember Slidell High as a guiding light, and the whole thing was built around lighthouses. We had lighthouses everywhere in the school for that year. Putting all the pieces together was the last one. And the first day of school, at Teachers' Day, each teacher got a big piece of a wooden jigsaw puzzle. And it was a part of a puzzle that went together. And they held that piece of puzzle knowing that they were an important piece to the school. And on Teacher Appreciation Week, in May, everyone brought their piece of the puzzle. They were made out of plywood. And they put it together, and it was a salute to the staff and the teachers who worked together to make that year right.
How did you get that made?
Well, in my garage.
So you did it.
Oh yeah, yeah. We made it. We cut it out. We painted it. We cut it out. We had to paint it again because after we cut it out, it had problems. But everyone had a piece, and they held on to their pieces. And it was neat to go into this classroom and see that each teacher had a piece of puzzle. And it was about maybe 12 by 12.
That had to be a good size
Yes,
finished piece.
it was a big size puzzle. It was not an easy thing. So
what
that was
happened
one.
to it?
They put it on the wall.
So it's still down there?
Well, I think maybe through the renovations it may not be there, but we actually glued it to the wall. So different themes. We had a Renaissance. We used the Shakespearean theme, Michelangelo, Renaissance of education. Every kid was important. We had one of those. It's just a variety of different things. But we had a theme for every year.
There were a lot of things that began at Slidell High and have now spread into other schools in the district, and ROTC was one of those. How did that come about?
Well, it really, Joe Lindsay was the inspiration for that, because he was a retired naval guy, and he said, you know, we can get ROTC by going through Congress or something. I don't know how he did it. But I said, yeah, let's go for it. So we got the Navy ROTC, and it was an amazing program. The thing is, it's so little cost to the school system. I think they pay a beginning teacher's salary for the instructor and his assistant, and that's all. All of the materials, which are up to date, all of the uniforms, everything is supplied by the government. So even transportation is supplied by the government. So they have just a wonderful opportunity to go into it. And we've had students that have excelled in that have won military honors, have gone through the academies. We even had one of our first ROTC students who was the football carrier for the President of the United States. You know, the keys, the codes. He was a naval officer, and he was reached that high.
What an honor! That's wonderful.
So,
and you talked about the academies and some of the other. You created new electives and that kind of thing for the students. And tell me about the funding sources that you have.
Well, it goes to first off to the lunchroom. We did not believe in concessions. We didn't sell concessions. Sylvia Dunn and I worked on that and wound up getting all kinds of awards for different things that we did in the cafeteria. So we didn't have that benefit of having concessions. But we had other opportunities. For instance, the collection of pennies was one of the things that I mentioned. We gave school dances. And if that was a mark event, every kid would go pretty much. And I remember making $12,000 on a dance, a homecoming dance, because
you're
all this,
kidding.
yeah.
Wow.
So there were a wide variety of different things we did to raise money. One of the things was we think we put Del Champs out of business because if you collected green Del Champs receipts, Del Champs would give you 1% of that receipt. Well, that was a mark event, and I think we brought in like $15,000 on green receipts. The students would camp out and ask people for their receipts. So there was a wide variety of ways we raised money.
Do any other schools do the mark events?
I think they have versions. They have versions of it, but we started it.
Your graduations were always known to be wonderful events.
Once again, it was a big audience to begin with. And of course, we always feared the rain issue was always, as we started looking at the weather reports 2 weeks ahead of time. But
so where were they held?
In the stadium, outside. Okay. Everything was outside, and it took a group effort. Every faculty member had an assignment. We were the first school to robe in their academic regalia, the faculty, because we wanted the faculty to celebrate what they had accomplished. You know, a lot of times we say, okay, this is the kids' graduation, and it is, but the faculty is the ones who brought those students there. So a lot of things had symbolism. For instance, the faculty made an honor guard in their academic regalia, and the students passed through as if they were passing through high school. They then sat around them so that they were still within the confines of the school, and then ultimately the students left and the faculty is left behind. So there are a lot of symbolisms and things like that. Music was very important. We always had a quartet of the best singers. They had to try out for it. The speeches, they had to try out for it. So
there were no surprises.
No surprises. Everyone knew their part and what to do and to pull it off.
Which again goes back to the pride they had in their school and community.
You see, the senior year to me is a very important year for a kid, and you have to build up activities for those seniors so that by the time they reach there, you know, they're filled with the love for the school, with anticipation of going off on their own, and that's what it's all about for me. That's when we started a number of senior activities. The senior play brought the students together. We had a senior picnic that brought them together. When we went to grad night, we were one of the first schools to start grad night, and I had sometimes 80% of this class going to grad night, and I took them to grad night, you know, with faculty chaperones. We didn't take parents as chaperones. Another thing I need to mention too that was really important was parent involvement. I believe in the PTA. My PTA board, I felt, were ambassadors to the school. So I would meet with them once a month, and they could ask me any question they wanted, and they could, you know, they could go out and promote the school, which many of them did. They were like ambassadors to the school, and we welcomed their participation.
And fortunately now, St. Tammany, every school is PTA.
Right.
But when you started, that wasn't the case.
No, you're right.
That is a very important piece to our whole district now,
Right.
thank goodness. Your centennial, you all just recently...
Yes, we...
And how many principals over this 100 years?
I think about...
Have you had at Slot?
Well,
principals.
68 of the years was Mr. McGinty and myself, so that's kind of unheard of. I think about 8 or 9 maybe principals from the beginning. The reason we picked 1908 was the first 4 graduates were all girls, and they graduated from the school, and the school has one of the diplomas.
But it was all girls when it started?
But the first 4 graduates were girls.
Oh,
the second year, there was a boy and a girl, the new houses, and they wound up marrying one another. So the 100 year was a big to-do. I was already retired, but I helped out with putting together a display of memorabilia, which was an interesting thing to do, and that went over pretty good. But they had a nice program. They had activities throughout the year. So it was
And when you started teaching there, what grades were there?
10th through 12th. And they brought the ninth grade over. I don't remember what year they brought the ninth grade
But
over.
when Slidell High started, it was 1 through...
Probably 1 through 11, because the 12th grade wasn't added till the late 40s. And really the 100th year of the school was not the 100th graduating class, it was the 99th, because of that 1 year that they kept the students. I would wonder what would happen today if we told the 12th graders they had to stay in school another year. I don't think that would be interesting.
Yeah, of course we've added kindergarten, and now
Right.
we've added pre-K, so we're starting at the other end now.
Right. That's right.
So you've had a number of different people as assistant principals and that you've done a lot of training for, and of course one of them we've talked about is Trey Foles, who's now our superintendent, and I think he had some... What kind of jobs did he hold when he was at your school?
He was assistant principal. He was my right-hand man, really. The interesting thing about Trey is he was in charge of things like the custodial. Of course, all of us did observations of teachers, but he was in charge of the building and the plant. But most important is that he wanted to know the job of the principal. So we were involved. Whenever I was there, Trey was there, and so he was involved. He knew the school inside and out, because he didn't just look at his job as just one aspect. He looked at it as total. And he participated a great deal in activities and helped me with activities.
And I think did almost anything you wanted. I think you have a picture of him cutting grass.
Oh, yeah, well, yeah.
Whatever it takes.
Oh,
That's
yeah,
what
whatever
an
it takes to
administrator
get the
does.
school ready, you know, and we worked well together. He's a dear friend.
Yeah. Joe, I know one of the honors, you've had many honors over the years and awards. What do you think was one of your greatest?
Well, there are several that I was really honored. Of course, I was named in 1996. I was named the high school principal of the year for Louisiana, and that was a real rewarding thing. And we was announced in Baton Rouge, and Trey Foles was with us. And he came back home, and my wife and I spent the night, and he said, "Don't come to school, we're going to come get you." So overnight, they had put together this tremendous celebration. I mean, they decorated the school and, just had posters. I don't know how they did it in this short period of time. And that next morning, when we arrived home, they had a limousine waiting for us, and they brought us to school, and we had a tremendous celebration. That was a nice, nice event. Another award that I received in Lincoln, Nebraska that I was proud of was an award for being a supporter of the theater, and there were only 5 given in the nation, and our dramatics teacher nominated me for that, and my wife and I traveled to Lincoln, Nebraska to receive that award. That was quite an honor.
It's certainly well deserved.
Well, thank you.
You've really created a wonderful thing there.
I've had a good ride.
As principal, you didn't just stay as principal. You wanted to be back in touch as a classroom teacher.
Yeah, and that's an interesting story, because I wanted to feel what teachers felt, because as an administrator, you really kind of get in your own little world. And I would get all over teachers about, you're not noticing that this kid's out of the dress code, this kid's chewing gum, and how can he go the whole morning and get to a 5th period class and no one noticed that he didn't have a belt on? So I decided I was going to go into the classroom and teach to see what it was like to prepare. So I took a Biology 2 class for a couple of weeks, and it was teaching a unit on the human digestive system. I remember it well. And I became so involved in the teaching of that subject that I didn't notice if the kid had a belt on or if he was chewing gum or something of that nature. So I was much more understanding of teachers who weren't looking for that kind of thing. Teachers are the heart and soul of education. I believe if you have a great teacher, you leave that teacher alone. Don't make them do extra things that just give them support.
And teaching's hard.
It is hard. And if you teach the same thing over and over, I remember teaching 5 straight biology classes, and this is when we had a 6-period schedule with no air conditioning. And maybe some less than enthusiastic students about biology, but it's hard. It's hard to keep up, and they have a terrific job to do. But I was blessed with some great ones. I really was.
Have you ever had any of your former students come back as teachers and work for you?
Yes, I have. In fact, there's several now that are at the school now that were under us. Maybe I have 6 or 7 that I had as students. And then I was starting, as a principal, I was starting to get grandchildren.
Oh, wow.
So that was kind of
that's when you decided
as teaching, but as students.
And of course, you mentioned Trey. That was a student of yours before you were principal.
That's right.
And your alums are very supportive of that school.
Well, it's always interesting because they always have huge reunions, but they also have a 50-year club, and this is everyone who's graduated at least 50 years ago. And they're a pretty active organization, and they take in their new members each year and have all kinds of activities, and they're very supportive of the school. You know, this Slidell High has lived across generations, so that green and white blood sort of flows through many, many veins.
What's the story with the mascot and the colors?
The mascot and the colors, the green and white tigers. When they chose as I understand the story, when they chose a mascot and school colors, the town was equally divided between Tulane and LSU fans. So in order to compromise both, they took the green and white from Tulane and the tiger from LSU, and that's how they became the Slidell High Tigers.
And now there are lots of other schools as they've split off that are tigers over there.
That's right.
So some of these kids work their way from pre-K all the way up through high school being tigers.
That's right.
Part of Slidell. A lot of the Slidell people seem to stay in the Slidell area. I mean,
they do. Yeah, I think that it has a lot to offer.
We were talking earlier about how difficult teaching is, that it's really a hard job. And I know I was principal of an elementary school. I can't even imagine what life is like for a principal of a high school with all of the extracurricular things you have, as well as everything else that goes on in a high school. What are some of the reasons that you went into administration and that you see as the great things about being an administrator?
Well, I absolutely love teaching. And I cried when I left, you know, when I had to make that transition in a couple of days between teacher and principal. But I think I saw an opportunity to really shape a whole lot of things that I would have as a principal. The rewards, I'll give you some examples. It's helping a kid, buying his books for correspondence class, seeing his lessons, and then seeing him graduate. And I did that. Listening to students, seeing them in trouble, and still putting your hand out to be their friend, to get them through their trouble. Some of the worst discipline problems I had wound up being the biggest bear hugs I got at graduation time. It's just being able to connect. If an administrator gets too far away from that, there's a danger. I like being in the hall. I like being with my bullhorn. I like being seen. I did cafeteria several years. I did all 3 cafeteria duties myself, and I knew everyone sat at each different lunch. It was just making the connection with students and getting to know them and know them by name. That was a real reward for me.
Thanks.
And I get tons of I still get notes from people that graduated years and years ago.
You probably will after this show airs too.
I'll tell you one of the things that what I liked about the academies, in the health academy, so I go to different hospitals and I always see a kid. We were at Children's Hospital in the intensive care unit with our grandson, and there was a kid who went to Slidell High who was a nurse, and I asked him where he got his start. He said, through the academy at Slidell High. I knew that's what I wanted to do. So those were the rewards. They're small, and you don't always know. Sometimes I get notes from people that I don't even remember, and they'll say, oh, you really helped me, and I don't remember. but that's the reward.
And the rewards don't get better than that.
No, they don't. They don't.
That's the highest compliment.
And a thank you, when you get a thank you from a student or a parent, it's just amazing to me.
Well, in closing, Joe, I'd just like to ask one final question. If you could give words of advice, tidbits of wisdom, to somebody thinking about going into education or somebody getting ready to start as a new teacher or a new administrator, what would you tell them?
Oh, I'd say follow your heart. As I was blessed. I was so blessed that I knew what I wanted to do. And I was willing to put in the time. I remember as a teacher, we were teaching BSCS biology, which was an outgrowth of the biological sciences curriculum study. And this started as a post-Sputnik thing, too. And it was way ahead of its time because it was all concept teaching, hands-on learning, not cutting up frogs as much as exploring the ecological boundaries of populations and so forth. But it was a lot of work as a teacher.
You worked with David Yarborough.
Yes, I sure did. We were close science buddies with biology, and he certainly observed me in my classroom, and I worked with him. But it took a lot of work. I would tell new teachers and new administrators to follow your heart. Don't be afraid of the time, because the time is going to eat at you. As a principal, days became nights, nights become Saturdays, Saturdays became Sundays, the year became the vacation. And fortunately, I had a wonderful wife who, supported that, in fact, helped me a lot. But that's what I would say, follow your heart. One of the things we also did was the slideshow for seniors. I should have mentioned that earlier.
But tell us about it. Go ahead.
Well, all through the year, I took slides of the seniors. And I put together at the end, to music, a slideshow saluting the class, a real tearjerker actually. And we did with 3 screens, projected the slides with 3 screens, coordinated with music, all done by hand. Today, you do all that by computer. And that was a nice send-off for the seniors.
So nobody wanted to miss their senior year at Slidell High,
no,
I wouldn't think.
They didn't opt out of it, for sure.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
My last year, 2003, I announced on Monday of graduation week that I was retiring. And so I said, well, I'm going to throw up my hat, my academic regalia hat. And we always told the kids to have bobby pins to hold the hat on. And so they questioned whether I was going to do it or not. But when I was announcing that I'm pretty close to proclaiming you graduates of Slidell High, I started taking the bobby pins out so I could throw my hat, and they all were laughing. But every kid hugged me. Every senior hugged me on the way out on that year.
What a memory to keep and cherish.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I do want to offer special thanks to Mr. Joe Buccaran for being here with us and sharing such great stories as we learn more about St. Tammany.